But that said, if other questions come up, maybe make note and we can come back to them. Let's see if we can circle into closed guard now. So, first thing with closed guard here is we have to establish a knee pull. When I lock my closed guard, I want to bring the bottom of my feet up so they point at the ceiling, so that when I cross my ankles, the inside of my knees are close to the back of my partner's shoulders. This is a theme we're going to return to a lot, but when you play guard, what you'll notice is that it's almost always the inside of the knee, here, can you stand up please? The inside of the knee against your partner that creates the tension you want. The inside of the knee against your partner is what we use when we play guard. So in a closed guard position, our priority is how are we going to get the inside of our knee to work against our partner. So we lock him up high. Now if he doesn't know what's going on here and he doesn't put any obstacles in the way, I can knee pull him down and forward like this. Okay? When his head comes down like this, if there's no obstacles, we start going in and making a cross collar grip. Okay? Now let's just say that he came so far down that his elbows came to the floor, like this. So we go cross collar grip. What's happening right now is my knees, my shoulders, everything's the same height. It's all symmetrical, it's all horizontal. The first thing in closed guard is we have this forward and backward battle that we're trying to win by creating a top knee and a bottom knee. This should sound familiar to what we did earlier in class because it's going to be a consistent theme here. Once we have top knee, bottom knee, we've got top shoulder, bottom shoulder. I've got a top hip and a bottom hip. I've got a top hand and a bottom hand. I use my top hand to pull my head above my hands. My right hand turns and pulls behind my back for the cross collar. Now the thing about the cross collar, I learned it as X choke and cross collar. I recommend you think about it as going from an X shape where everything's the same height and converting it to a cross shape where everything is side on. Okay? My right arm pulls and my left arm stops my partner from moving. Again, just like the back position where our right hand pulled our partner and our left hand stopped them from following the pull. So in this case, if I have a cross collar here and all I had was my right hand grip and I turn side on like this, when I start to pull on Owen's lapel, his head naturally moves this direction, just like with the lapel or from the back. So I put my stopper hand in. This one doesn't have to move. It just shoves him into the first hand. I grip, I make a full fist. I pull my head above my hands and I touch my elbow on the floor. Now my right elbow turns, I externally rotate my shoulder and pull him behind. So my elbow goes behind my ribcage. Okay, he'll tell you that's a pretty strong attack that motivates him to push his head up and away. So we can go more into the cross collar a little bit later, but the idea is here, this is one of those knockout punches that happens because he's not alert to the fact that his head coming down and forward is a big problem. Okay? So now he's alert. He doesn't want his head to come down and forward, and because of the combination of gripping and knee pulling, he has to do something about this. Now the first thing he could do is directly resist me by pulling his head back and away, like this. So when he does this, he's looking to pull his head behind the knot of his belt. Anything short of that, he needs his upper body to reinforce his position. So if I said, hey Owen, no gripping, and I said, do not let me break you down and forward, ready, go. See how he pulls his head back and away? More, so I don't pull you down, He has to pull his head behind his belt, a little more. Now, I start rising up. I get up to my hand, I put my opposite foot on the floor, and we go into a hip bump sweep. When we go to a hip bump sweep here, we're gonna trap our partner's arm by going thumb and wrist around his elbow so your hand touches your own rib cage. Don't grab like this, over the elbow. I look towards my support hand, I get my head and hips higher than his, and we turn over. So if we started cross collar, we're bringing our partner down, we move off to the side here, top leg and bottom leg, and we find our submission. He starts moving back and away from me, but he doesn't have any obstacles to stop me from rising. So we put our hand and foot on the ground, I go over the top of his arm, and we resolve the hip bump sweep. Super basic stuff, I know you guys all know this. Now, we start pulling our partner down and forward. He starts going back and away. I start rising up, but before I get to his hand, he puts it on the floor. Now, we start thinking about kimura. The cue for kimura is, can I get my head and my armpit of my frame arm over his elbow? The further his hand away, the further that target. The more his elbow goes away, the more we look at triangles as opposed to kimuras. But when his hand is close to me here, kimura is a good option. So we go elbow and armpit and head over his arm. I don't look to push his arm, I get my head right over his hand. I bring my elbow and wrist close to his hand here, and I pull my hips over to my grips here. Now I turn my body so that the bottom of my far foot points at the ceiling, and I lock my guard in place. I want to take his hand inside of my knee. So to do that, I'm going to line up his two shoulders, his elbow, and my head in a straight line like this. I don't want to be here, in a straight line. I get my grip, and I put his hand on my attacking part of my leg, which is the inside of my knee. Put his hand inside my knee, and we finish the kimura. Rob, can I work this? Sorry, Craig, can I work this? Rob's had enough of me for the next 10
No, I'm good.
I got to give all of you a hard time a little bit. Right? Okay, so we go in, we're pulling our partner down, he's pulling back and away, I come up to the balance here comes that kimura. I go over to his hand, I don't try to bring his hand to me. I turn my body side on so that the bottom of my foot points at the ceiling and I lock on his far hip. Look how we have a top knee again. That controls his posture. Look how the inside of my knee is my target. I bring everything into a straight line here. Not here. Here.
Yeah, that's okay.
Now I put his hand inside my knee. And that gives me
Nice
the
stretch.
leverage.
You can stretch it good.
I need to
Good
stretch so
stretch.
far? Okay. So we have an initial battle. It's forward and backward, right? It's cross collar if you break them down forward. It's hip bump sweep and kimura when they retreat going backwards. The premise so far, no obstacles on you. They don't put any hands on you. We're still in territory where it's like white belt and before, right? But this is important because it's not so much that the obstacles are never there, it's that they come and go. As you work with good people, they put the hands in the correct place, but then they go to do things or their balance gets upset and their grip is compromised, they have to recover it. So we want to think about it as sometimes the grip is totally worthless and we should attack in a specific way. Then the grip takes on different character and quality and maybe we need to change our approach. The first battle is forward and backward, okay? Now, once the person is alert to this, they start putting obstacles on you. Okay, Rob, can you wait, please? I'll just swing back in for Craig a little bit. So let's look at what those obstacles are going to be. Closed guard position. What hopefully is super clear by now is when I'm in his closed guard, I cannot let him rise up to me, and I cannot let myself get pulled down and forward. That's a combination of his grip that pulls me down and forward. That's a combination of his legs that pull me down and forward. When I go to oppose all that, he rises up. And because he's rising up, if he puts his hand on the ground, he puts his foot on the floor and comes up like this, when I go to oppose him and he drops back down, he breaks me down, coming forward. So this problem is not going to stop itself. He's going to continuously pull me down and forward until I oppose him. Generally, you're going to run into a few things. Body, support position, and a lead hand. Okay? Body refers to gripping positions where we're not holding the gi, but we're not on the floor with our limbs. Usually the purpose here is quick response. I can't build up a solid grip yet, but I am under this duress of his knee pull or gripping, and so I have to check his progress. It's okay to go pinkies down. If you have to stay body for any length of time, maybe you're doing no gi, probably thumbs up like this. Don't put any part of your hand on the floor. Okay? Keep them so that their head is down on the floor and your head can stay up. In any kind of body grip, the primary thing you have to watch for is inside swims. He swims his wrist inside of mine, go one at a time. One at a time, he goes up to his shoulder, up to the shoulder, and now his knee pull breaks me. Let's real quick. So he puts hands on me, right? I swim inside, wrist up to my shoulder. We don't want to go and open our wing to clear it. If he's grabbing my knee, grab him. We swim inside, strong, strong, strong. I don't want to try and break his grip here. I'm not trying to reach up to his arm like this. I'm trying to swim inside so that my knee pull makes his hand slide off me. It's really important we don't get in the habit of fighting upper body with upper body. Compromise their position, wrist inside of wrist, and then knee pull forward. Now, we're in the position we really want. Does that make sense? So that's body. Body has some downsides. He can swim inside and things like this. So we don't want to stay here for very long. We go to the support position. Pull the slack out from behind the gi. Knuckles go in the armpit. knuckles go in the armpit. You know you're doing a good job because you see that line of tension there in the jacket. This is worthless. He can move very freely with me. I want to bind him up in his lapels. He's sewn into this jacket and sleeves. Use it. Okay, take the slack out and punch in. Now he tries to inside swim on me. It's much harder to do because my elbows can monitor him. In this support position, we're thinking like a gymnast on the rings, holding themselves up at the top of the support position. Biceps turn out. Armpits point forward. Okay, we don't internally rotate, we externally rotate. So we're here. Now when he tries to pull me forward, look how my elbows bend to the inside as opposed to the outside. Now I know all of you know this, but this is the kind of thing where when fatigue sets in and he's really fighting me, this deterioration often, now he starts the inside swim and it actually works. But if I allow my head to come down, but my shoulders stay externally rotated, he can pull me down all he wants, and I know I can recover from this. Because I know where I cannot give, and I know where I can give. Okay? So here's our support position. When we use the support position, I don't push him down, I push my tailbone against his heels to push my own butt back. When you open someone's closed guard, it's because, let's jump out of this. When you open someone's closed guard, it's because their heels get pulled so far away from their butt that the notch unlatches. Okay? But once the legs straighten, they unlock from each other. The way you straighten someone's legs out is to pull their heels away from their butt. That's why standing is so effective. The action of standing draws the heels away from the butt, and as long as the person on the bottom stays on the floor, they get stretched out. Now it's pretty easy to open the guard. So, body first. He's knee pulling, I stop him here. We build up our support position. Now, once I've got my support position, I'm beating the inside swim. I'm beating the knee pull and the hand on the outside trying to pull my head down here. Okay? Because as he swims to the inside, you will close. And as you close, you get in closer range of the hand pulling your head, so you need to extend away. Okay? So having students get in this position and getting comfortable with this grip, Rob tries to pull me down and forward using any method, right? Grips, knee pulling, swimming, whatever you can. And just practicing managing the support position. Then it's a quick change. We go to the lead hand. Two lapels come together. I bind them up in one hand and I lift his chin like a Pez dispenser. I want him to have his head on the floor and my head up. When I feel that's under stress and he's rising up, I don't push his chest down, come on, I just raise his chin. Okay, they'll always put a fault in his spine and return him to the mat. I use two hands on the jacket until I'm confident in the one hand taking over, then I can release. Usually you don't release to nowhere, you run down the arm and you find the sleeve. Don't do this. And try to pluck it out of the air. Track their progress. You can go back through the support position. Then it goes, we step up on the side of the trapped arm. We kickstand our leg out to the side, so we're not here, where my head can easily be offset. Now I step up in a circle. Here. Everything gets pulled in. My feet get to the height of my knees. I want to push my knees forward so that they're right over my ankles. My butt goes back and I push him up like this. Now I bring the sleeve with me up to vertical posture. I move my head over to the side, thumb post on the inside, and push to open up his guard. Okay. Now we're talking about closed guard bottom, but this is essentially what is always happening. If they're down in the kneeling position, we do what we're going to finish up doing right now. But this is the general order of what you're fighting against. That knee pull forces the body position with the hands. It forces the support position. It forces the lead hand. It makes it necessary. So now, we'll talk about what to do about it. So, same page so far where we've got this forward and backward action, right? Yes. Same page so far where he's got a few options with regards to his upper body, but all of it is keep my head down, keep his head up. That's okay? So now, the forward and backward is always going to happen anytime I relieve one of the hands from me so that I can freely create a top shoulder and start to sit up on him. Always, that's what we're going to go for. Okay? Now that might end up being cross collars, hip bump sweeps, kimuras, but we understand the first criteria is when there's no obstacles in the way, we go forward and back. The next battle is across the center line because these obstacles are always going to come in. What we're looking at is where's his elbow in relation to his shoulder. Right now, both of Rob's elbows are outside of his shoulder. Right now, one elbow is inside the shoulder, one is outside. Now both inside, Now one is across the center line, okay? We're always trying to figure out, this is elbow outside of his shoulder, inside of his shoulder, or across the center line. When the elbow is outside of the shoulder, we're almost always moving towards the triangle. This is our end game position. We will usually start with the straight arm lock, but almost always we will convert into different forms of triangle. Okay? So when we see elbows open, our cue is there's some form of triangle. But let's take this to a bit of an extreme right at the start so we can see why this is important. Let's go back to that forward and back battle. I start pulling on Rob, he starts backing away. Head up, backing away. I go to here, I check a hip bump sweep, but he knows I want kimura. So he places his hand further away when I hip bump sweep. His elbow is outside of his shoulder, correct? There's your triangle. Right? So this is, I know this is somewhat obvious to you in various positions, but we're trying to not go, oh, do this, do this, do this, but if these conditions are met, go in this direction. If these other conditions are met, take this other direction. If an elbow is outside the shoulder, we're looking for triangles. Okay, that's one of our end game positions from bottom. Get into a trap triangle and finish it. The second one is the top lock and arm bar. So if the elbow outside the shoulder means triangle, elbow inside the shoulder means forehead and bicep together. Top lock, from the top lock, you'll go in and attack your partner's arm or the arm lock. And then going further than that, the elbow's not just inside the shoulder, but it goes beyond the center line. Now, we've got a lot of other things we can get into, some of which we looked at today. The big thing in this arm across position is where's his head in relation to his two elbows. Right now, because his head is on the same side as his two elbows, it's safe for me to continue scooting and taking his back. If on the other hand he knew that and he didn't want his back taken, he'd probably drive into me. Now his head goes across my center line. Once his head is across my center line, we scoop into the legs, we point our hamstrings up to the ceiling, and now we can just take our partner right over where their spine is pointing. So the first big battle in closed guard is forward and backward, cross call, kimura, hip bump sweep. There are some other things on the fringe there, the triangle is obviously related to that, but the first battle is forward and backward. Your knee pulling them. They don't like that. They start putting obstacles on you. So then it's the second battle, the one across the center line. Is their elbow outside the shoulder when they put that obstacle down? Is their elbow inside their shoulder when they put it down? Or can it be drawn across the center line? Whichever one of those it is will give you the appropriate attack. Does that make sense so far? Big question so far. Okay, yeah. Let me get a sip of water while you wait. So let's see if we can look at the steps of the second stage of these attacks. These are probably the most interesting of them because the first stage, it's pretty straightforward, right? That cross collar, hip bump, and kimura we can come back to later, but it's pretty easy to blow someone out with leverage on that because they just have nothing going on there. This position, though, they're opposing you, they're making their body pretty strong, so we gotta have some things we can do about it. So I like to teach these as individual sections, and then later on we bring them together. Again, this would be the difference between blue belt and purple belt. Blue belt, we gotta learn arm lock, we gotta learn triangle, and we gotta learn the straight arm lock all by themselves. Later on, bring them together. So let's start with the straight arm lock. I'm sure you guys have seen this in some way, shape, or form before. We started to swim it in some way. We've knee pulled our partner down. Here's an elbow outside the shoulder. We're gonna end up with a triangle, but we're gonna start with a straight arm lock. We're gonna swim to a high elbow underhook. I want my elbow higher than his. I'm gonna take a grip where my wrists go over each other and I lock. I want to use my left elbow as a frame against him so I can turn my body side on. As usual, we're trying to create that top knee, bottom knee situation. Okay, let's just turn over. Here. Now my left knee here is going to keep Craig away to some degree. It can be where it is now on his shoulder. It's also fine for it to be on this side here. For now, we're going to go on this side. My right knee is going to come down. Now the key to this straight arm lock is can I keep my head higher than his when I go to finish? When he wants to escape from this, as we'll see in a little bit, what he's going to do is go from his elbow to his hand, which is going to expose him to the triangle. Okay? As we talked about earlier, an elbow outside the shoulder means triangle. But from this position here, let's just talk about a few things that are happening. We've got a knee here that's keeping him away. We've got a top knee here that, as usual, is keeping his posture broken down, keeping his head down specifically and in front of his knees whenever possible. My right heel hooks into his shoulder. It doesn't relax here. Hooks the shoulder. The right heel preserves angle. I want all of this in a straight line. When Craig tries to square up to me here, move your right knee forward. See how this right heel keeps me at an angle to him. If I lose this, he squares up. Okay? So we've got our legs set in position here. This should look like single leg X guard. Okay, should look very similar. When it's time to finish this position, I point my elbow at his ear. I cover it with my own hand. Now here's the key. My head has to get closer to his, but my hips have to slide away from him. Okay? Craig will tell you it feels like his elbow is about to explode, like it's made of glass right now. It doesn't look like much, but it's freaking intimidating, this attack. Can we real quick?
You see to lose the elbow there. Rotate to the omoplata. Right?
That also, I'll show you what usually happens. So we go in, we take high elbow underhook. I want to get my elbow higher than his. We link up wrist to wrist. We use that frame, create the top leg and the bottom leg. Okay? Now I want to point my elbow at his ear. My left hand helps pull me into that position. Owen will tell you right now, if I go like this and pull straight down, he can posture up, like this. But instead, it's like I'm climbing and rotating in a spiral. So now when he tries to posture up, it's not going to happen. My right knee holds him down. Elbow points at the ear, my head gets closer, and my hips slide away. And so that will be our straight arm lock. We're going to see that a lot, but this is the first attack when we're on the second phase of closed guard, when the elbow is outside the shoulder. Okay? Why is the elbow outside the shoulder? Because they're putting their hands down to stop you from winning that first battle, to stop you winning the cross collar, stop you hip bump sweeping them. If their elbow's outside their shoulder, we go straight arm lock. Okay? Actually, so now, straight arm lock position. We're looking to attack and finish it. Elbow outside the shoulder, though our real end game is always the triangle. So once we're here, we're paying attention to, can I get my head higher than my partner's head? If I can do that, I'm going to finish. The main way he's going to stop me is by putting his right hand on the floor and gaining the height of his head. So I retract my knee to my chest and I step here on his bicep. I send my legs through and I pull him in with my legs. I grab a hold of my own shin, we scoop underneath the leg, and we turn off the shoulder. Whenever we're locking a triangle, a good all-around cue is to try and put the lock where your knee meets your shin. Try to put the lock exactly on the back of their head and you'll get a super tight triangle. Okay? So that will be our first transition in phase 2. Straight arm lock to the triangle. Our main cue is their hand, instead of their elbow, is giving them height. Now hopefully we're starting to see what I mentioned early on. I want to be able to break this down to the level of physiology. There's a whole bunch of ways this can resolve that I know all of you know. I know you know this can turn into an arm lock where you're going belly down, etc. I know you know this can turn into a variety of sweeps, a variety of sumigaishi, things like this, a variety of kimuras and things of this nature. Right? But what we're trying to do is say what's appropriate that white belts could maybe have an idea about, kimura, hip bump sweep. What would a black belt maybe benefit from? Hey, if you're in closed guard and someone's elbow's outside their shoulder, there's a triangle somewhere. Just start looking for it. Okay, you know a lot of different things. Can you synthesize them into creating the opportunities for triangles when you see hands hitting them out like this? And so we're putting that together by saying, well, we got to be able to break this down to physiology. It's not good enough to say, I can kind of move his arm around a little bit, and sometimes on Wednesdays, like it just is great. It's, can I get his elbow inside of his shoulder? If that cue doesn't work, if you're like, man, I'm getting his elbow inside the shoulder, but no arm lock happened, we got to change the cue. We got to improve on that front. But right now we're thinking elbow inside the shoulder, I can recognize that physiology. That's clear to me. That is not this. This is elbow outside the shoulder. And that distinction is important because now when you're looking at people do closed guard, you're going to say, wait a minute, that was elbow outside the shoulder. There's a triangle there. Ah, they found it. Oh, wait, they didn't find it. I better go help them. Things like this. Does that make sense?
Does that start at white belt?
This is the thing, is you've had different, let's say, starting thresholds of white belt, right? Mm-hmm. Some white belts, they start off and you're like, remember your left hand, it's like, it's this one. And in other ones, you're like, did you wrestle for your whole life? This is where it's kind of like, well, what's appropriate? You can try out some of these cues. Some students, you're like, hey, did you notice how their elbow's outside their shoulder? And they're like, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll pick up on these things, right? Other students, you don't want to intimidate them with how much there is to know.
Right.
You want to
Yeah.
make it, right? You want to
Yeah,
make it
that's
no
simple.
fail in a lot of ways. We're kind of like, hey, what you did today, compared to most people, it's not all that much. But I can tell for you it was quite a bit. And remember, martial arts, as you guys know this, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, just trying to remind all of us of this, is martial arts is mostly for the people who it seems like they just are not going to make it. Because if you can get those people to get the breakthrough, the athletes and all those people, they're going to be fine. You know, but it's the person here like, man, this could save you, or like nothing might save you, I don't know. But like, how do we figure this out? And when we get further into this, we'll talk about things like no fail drills. For example, when we do stand-up, one of the ones I like is to have people play hot hands, like we did before. Because I can gauge the temperature of the class. Are people really tired on this Friday? If they're all just like, but if people are laughing and smiling by the end of the round, I know we can do a little bit more, right? So these are the kind of things we'll go over after we dig into these mechanical elements. Okay, so up to this point, close guard. We got a forward and backward battle, yeah? We got a forward and backward battle. It might be a cross collar, kimura, hip bump sweep. That's our initial gambit. Then they start pinning you in some way. Hands on the body, hands on lapels, lead hand, something like this. So we start going, okay, what's the positioning of these obstacles? Is it elbow inside the shoulder? Is it elbow outside the shoulder? Is it elbow across the center line? If it's elbow outside the shoulder, let's start straight arm lock. Of course, there's omoplata, there's other things there, but let's start straight arm lock, and let's think triangle as our end game. Okay? I like to have people do triangles early because it's something that teaches you to use your legs against someone's upper body, and you're going to fail a lot with it at the beginning, but if you put the time into it, it'll help you long-term in jiu-jitsu. So I like people thinking about triangles early on. And amongst us here, you know what I mean when I say there's an expectation that at least on one side, if you put someone your weight in a trap triangle, there's the expectation you're going to finish them. Doesn't have to be on both sides. Doesn't have to be on someone much bigger than you. But your own size, that's a reasonable expectation. And so we want to start developing that early on, just like our standing skills, et cetera, et cetera. So now let's look at the arm lock, the elbow inside the shoulder position, and see what we can do from there. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, so we'll save the arm across for either another time, or maybe we can settle it with the 2 weeks we did in class. Let's look at the arm lock, and then we'll call for it. Okay, Craig, come with. So now we're in close guard again. We know about our forward and backward battle. We know about his desire to put an obstacle on us to stop the forward and backward battle. And then we know that we're looking at the positioning of the limbs to decide what to do about this. If it's elbow outside, we go straight arm lock, and we look for triangles. When it's elbow inside, we're looking for arm locks. I like to go with a top lock version of this arm lock because it keeps things under control. So we bring bicep and forehead together as best we can. It can be with straight grips, or it can be with cross grips. Once I bring forehead and bicep together, I want my legs to hold him down. You'll notice again that my inside of my knee layers on, my second leg layers on top of that to help hold it down, and it's my knees that hold him in place. Now if his arms do not connect to each other, you cover the blade of their hand, then the rest of their hand, you lift up your hip and you bring your head, their hand outside their ear, and you'll get a nice twisting arm lock. Almost always people will then lock up their arm inside their arm like this. Okay? His thumb hidden inside his elbow. So now I'm going to lace up on his arm and hold my own thigh. I'm going to knee pull him forward, and I'm going to scoot inside of his leg here to create an angle. What I want to do is turn my leg in the same direction and pull down with my left knee. I'm going to brush my cross-face leg over, and I want to get my knee on the back of his head. A good cue here is to take everything into position like we are now. Make sure that your knees are at the appropriate height, and then as a check, just let go of your grip and have your partner stand up. Let's stand up your feet, Craig. And he'll end up picking up my whole body from the ground before I ever lose his arm. Okay? This is only because the cross-face knee is above his ear. If I go here, he's gone. Okay? So our cue is the knee, the back of the knee of the cross-face leg, at a minimum is higher than the ear. Desirable maximum is on the back of the head. Once that's all in place, I have him locked. I never want the cross-face knee to go vertical over the bottom knee. I always want to recreate a top knee, bottom knee with my right leg being on top. You'll see that takes his defensive arm out of the picture because it has to hold him up over here when I do this. If that stops, now his defensive arm kicks back in and he's holding his own arm. Okay? So now I'm laced up on the arm. Craig has his defensive arm locked up in place. Okay? we've got our scoop grip, and we're locked in, ready to go. Now we need to separate his hands. I'm going to take the inside of my wrist against the inside of his wrist. So we go up to the inside, and I roll his wrist up to the ceiling, like this. I release the scoop grip, and I go inside, and I take a thumb wrap grip, where I wrap his thumb into my thumb, like this. His figure 4 grip is always trying to hide his thumb from me. So what I want to do is separate his hands. I want to separate them, go in, thumb wrap, and I keep his palm up. My right pulls his right, and my left pushes. So we get a nice finish. I do not like this finish.
Why?
Look at how much range of motion. That, Craig, versus
Takes a lot longer.
this, not bad.
Yeah, the turn.
Here, I pull your right elbow towards my hip bump. What's actually happening, remember that radius on the thing?
Yeah.
When you do it this way, you're just attacking one of the bones of the forearm against the elbow as opposed to both at the same time. And so I'm just attacking this one here. So if we're in the position here, instead of here's arm lock rub versus awesome, guys. Appreciate you guys being patient, sticking around. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Hopefully these get better as we do them. I know that it's a trying ask on a Friday.
Plus 100 int.
Yeah. I would say, can I borrow that?
Turn them to the arm bar.
Actually, can I do this? Let's just make sure this is actually in frame. I've done this before as well. Let me just make sure I got your question right. If you're here, you're talking about this position here and stepping in.
Yeah.
So what I don't want is to have my foot disconnected because then he pummels his arm free. Right?
Yeah.
Ideal is to put the shoelaces here because until my shoelaces come off, the gap he needs to get out doesn't exist. Right? Here is okay because it eliminates most of what he needs to get his hand free, but it's not as good as my shoelaces here. It's just hard to get here when he's really resisting. But it's hard for me to oppose his resistance if my foot is disconnected. So I plant my foot here, and a lot of times I'll hook it in place, and then I'll slowly walk it all the way back until it's in the position I want. Were there other questions from class?
Oh, I did have one more.
Sure.
When you get that seatbelt grip, before you get up to the elbow, when do you start bringing that elbow back? Like, because I noticed the choke is on like when you're doing it, like right away.
Yeah.
Are you already feeding that elbow back before you getting up to it?
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say that it's the way I am getting up.
Okay.
Right. So can I actually have you lay beside me? So if we're here and I'm like this, like it's just a horrible like situation for me.
Yeah.
Then that pull that I would normally do once I'm up, I'm going to use that as part of my way of getting up here.
Are you pulling yourself up?
Yeah, okay. I'm pulling my head and hands towards each other. And then what happens
versus dragging him.
Yeah, as opposed to just dragging him or myself, right? So they're both, what was it?
You're not dragging your elbow back then?
I am, but it doesn't tend to move that far because he's running away from me, right?
Yeah.
So my pull...
both are like happening at the same time?
Yeah, so my pull is opposing his retreat, right? So because of that, my elbow doesn't move that much. If he relaxed, right, I would drag him into me. Sorry. But his action going away from me makes that so that doesn't happen. So what actually happens is I sort of slingshot to him.
Okay.
And now that I'm glued to him, I will take the time to pull him in a second time.
I see.
Right? But that second time I pulled him in wouldn't have been necessary if he was relaxed.
It's bungeeing.
Yes. This is one of the things, like when we talk about the physiology, like remember that your physiology is much more like elastic, like a trampoline, than it is like a clockwork soldier type of thing, right? Even like here's radius, ulna, right? They're parallel right now. This connects here. This connects here, right? They're fixed here, fixed here. If I turn my palm over, my radius and my ulna are crossing them. They're like an X. They're bending over each other. It's not like my bones are brittle. They'll twist and bend, and that's how we take slack out of things. And so whenever we're gripping and pulling, we're on the attack, we're trying to take out slack. If we're defending, we're trying to put slack back in. That's why we bridge, right? To create a gap underneath you so you can fall into that slack and you can fit a frame into the gap that now exists, right? So when we're attacking, we're trying to twist and pull the slack out. And any way we can take that slack out is going to be good for us.
On the lapel grip from closed guard, what prevents them from armbarring you? Like, I was always told not to grab up high when I set that grip. Like, I've always been told not to grab up high because of the risk of armbar.
Let's see. I'm on top.
Yeah. So like when you set that grip like here versus by the belt, like what's to stop them from like
So
coming around for an armbar?
So the first point of this is there's always trade-offs to grip. So I'm more exposed to an arm lock here because my elbow is inside the shoulder line, inside my shoulder, rather than if I were here, right? So inherently compared to this will have more arm lock exposure. But what tends to happen is if I'm in this position correctly, my head will stay up. In order to arm lock me, my head has to come down below the knee that's going to cover it.
Oh yeah.
Right? So until that can happen, until that relationship changes, there's no arm lock. What we're going to see though is most of this leg getting over my head is this leg down here. You know this already, right? If I keep this down, right? But what tends to happen if I turn this leg over, in this position right now, this knee is higher than this one. For Rob to be successful, this knee needs to get higher than that. Down. Okay? So as long as I know that, when I use my lead hand here, if you start shifting off for the arm lock, I need to prevent that from happening. If that changes, I need to switch which lead hand I'm using. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So again, it's not to say that there's no arm lock. I'm more exposed than this position, let's say. But as long as the cross-face leg can't get above my head, there's no actual danger there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good question. Anything else?